Hello, everyone. Tonight we're going to the beating heart of ancient Rome, not marble temples or sparkling fountains, but alleys, stairways, smoke, and stench. You wake up in a ramshackle wooden apartment, the walls so thin you can hear your neighbors snoring and the water boiling at the same time. You stretch, yawn, and feel your stomach rumble. There's just one small problem. There's no stove. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on the fan for a gentle hum and enjoy the night's journey together. Your building is an insular, one of Rome's notoriously flammable apartment blocks. 5 stories, maybe 6 if the landlord is feeling bold. The ground floor is for the rich. You're on the 3rd floor, which means you still have walls. Sort of. It's noisy, crowded, drafty though, and all wood. There's no insulation, no running water, and certainly no safe way to cook. Building a fire indoors is like praying to the gods for a citywide barbecue disaster. Fires are forbidden, and frankly, unless you're rich enough to have slaves and olive oil, cooking has never really been an option. So when hunger strikes, and it always does, you join the rest of the crowd in the streets. You're not alone. Rome is packed with people like you, hungry, tired, a little suspicious of the smells wafting through the air. Someone's roasting chickpeas. Someone else is selling bread from a basket. And just ahead, wedged between a bathhouse and an angry goat, you see a stone counter steaming from clay pots sunk beneath the table. You found your kitchen. Thermopolium, Rome's deli counter, a few buried dolia, and a man behind the counter with a ladle and a permanent scowl. This is where most of the empire's people ate. You don't go inside, there's nothing inside. You lean over the edge of the pot, point to the least suspicious smelling one, and hand him a few coins. He ladles something thick, hot, and slightly beige into your bowl. It's a mixture of beans, maybe cabbage, maybe regret. You don't ask, you don't want to know. This is life in the heart of an empire. Historians still debate whether these food stalls were a sign of urban prosperity or a symbol of poverty. Were they a clever stopgap solution for a city that forgot to install stoves in most homes? Or were they just a patchwork of social systems that left most people too poor to cook? No one knows for sure. What we do know is that thermopolia were everywhere. In Pompeii alone, archaeologists have found more than 150 of them. It was a city. Imagine Rome. If you were rich, you wouldn't need these places. You'd have your own chef, your own kitchen, and chairs so comfortable that even bread would be jealous. But most Romans weren't rich. Most Romans lived like you, cramped, stuffy, hungry. And so they came. To the corner stall where lentils boiled all day long. To the food stall where one person shouted about garum and another tried to haggle over boiled onions. This was your local restaurant, your social hub, your only real chance at a warm meal. The food was simple, but it was satisfying. Beans, pulse, a kind of cereal porridge, sometimes chickpea pancakes, or cabbage stewed into a mushy mess. On festive days, maybe a piece of sausage floating in something that might be soup. It wasn't fancy, but it was hot and fast. Rome wasn't built on feasting and wine. It was built on lentils and flatbread, garum and grits. The glory of the empire rested on the shoulders of those who stood in line every day, holding clay bowls and hoping for something better than last night's leftovers. You finish your meal, wipe your mouth on your sleeve, and walk back out onto the crowded street. No bills, no complaints, no dessert menus, just the sound of someone else's bowl being filled and another pot starting to boil. And now you're full enough time for a little work. So before you stray too far from your imaginary bowl of lentils, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually like what I'm doing here. Oh, and hey, leave a comment about your city and the time of day while you're watching. Did you snack while you listened? The Romans would agree. You follow the scent before you see it, not the heady aroma of roasting meat, nor the sweetness of fresh bread. No, this smell is older, earthier. It's the steam of old lentils and garlic, of cabbage that's been withering for the past week. And there, hidden under a shady canopy, it's waiting for you, your local thermopolium, Rome's first fast food joint. It's nothing special to look at. A long stone counter riddled with age, dolia deep earthenware jars buried on the surface, their contents bubbling lazily. The frontage opens onto the street. Behind it, A chef who's probably been up since before sunrise and doesn't want to answer any questions. He's stirring one pot while glaring at another as if it owes him money. You approach, bowl in hand, no menu, no line. You just point to whatever smells least like regret. A spoon, a clink, a muttered curse. The transaction is complete. The thermopolium is your lifeline. It is also your social circle, your newsstand, your weather report. If it rains, the bread will be soggy. If it is hot, the garum will be suspect. Either way, you are here because home cooking is either illegal, impossible, or both. Rome did not plan its city around private kitchens. It planned it around streets, movement, public life, and that meant food had to be available on the go. These stalls were the city's solution. You ate while standing, leaning, squatting, or walking. No chairs, no candles, just hot food in clay bowls. And the hope that today's mystery meat was not the same as yesterday's, because yesterday was tough. Some of these stalls were better than others. There was a stall across the street famous for its mashed lentils with fried onions. Another 2 blocks away sold chickpea pancakes so crispy they could break. And there was a stall by the bathhouse that had been closed down twice for, well, reasons. Don't ask. The best stalls were crowded, noisy, and sometimes even jostling. The worst were quiet, and that was never a good sign. These places weren't reserved for the poor. Wealthy freed slaves and even low-ranking officials would stop by, quickly, anonymously, and when your slave was busy, or you just left the forum in a bad mood, there was nothing like sulking over a spoonful of stewed cabbage. Historians still debate the extent of the thermopolia. Were they all legally run? Were some tied to specific guilds or families? Did the best stalls compete for ingredients from the same coastal fish market, or just rely on what they could get from the shady man with the goat cart? What's clear is that they were everywhere. Pompeii alone had more than 150 stalls, and the city wasn't even that big. Inside some stalls, archaeologists have found frescoes painted signs for the things they were selling: bread, wine, skewered meats, even desserts. Sometimes the paintings looked better than the real thing. And in rare cases, there was graffiti. Customer notes, compliments about the food, or warnings about that guy who never paid. Yelp reviews in Latin. Thermopolia is more than just a physical space. It is a sensory overload. The scraping of spoons, the crackling of firewood, the overlapping sounds of conversation, the smells of garlic, vinegar, cooking oil, and smoke, the texture of worn stone, warm dishes, and the ground slippery from spilled stew. And the people, a rotating cast. Workers just getting off work, soldiers on break, slaves sent out to carry coins and instructions. You might see a young student writing poetry while chewing on burnt flatbread, or a merchant loudly complaining about taxes with a mouthful of fish. And then there are the regulars. The one-eyed man always orders the same soup. The woman brings her own herbs. The vendor's son tries to sneak a bite behind his father's back. These stalls are more than just convenient. They are familiar. But familiar doesn't mean comfortable. You've been burned before, literally and figuratively. That time you thought it was bean stew and it turned out to be something else. Or the day the vendor messed up your payment and gave you garum instead of change. You can still taste the salt. But you keep coming back, every day, because this is Rome, a city too big to feed itself the old-fashioned way, a city that made fast food before fast food was a thing. These stalls are always bustling with laughter. They carry gossip, secrets, and steam. They know your face, they know your habits, and when your bowl is empty and your breath smells of onions and vinegar, they remind you that in Rome, the empire waits for no one. So you just grab a bite and keep moving. Because lunch doesn't come with relaxation, it comes with lentils and a deadline. If Rome had a national flavor, it wasn't wine, olives, or honey cakes. It was something saltier, viscous, pungent, something more spicy. The one ingredient that clung to everything from porridge to roasted dormice. The golden liquid that united soldiers and senators, enriched the coast, and haunted the alleys with its sour tang. Garum, it wasn't a dish. It was a medicine, a beer, a daring gamble with fish, time, and sun, and whether you liked it or not, it was in your bowl. Let's talk about the sauce that built an empire. Garum began innocently enough. You took fish anchovies, mackerel, sardines, anything cheap and greasy, and removed the unwanted parts. Guts, heads, tails. Then you placed them in a vat of salt, lots of salt. You cover it, put it in a warm place, and wait. Weeks, maybe months, and while it's there, it transforms, ferments, liquefies into something either wonderful or horrifying, depending on your perspective. Eventually, the mixture turns into a thick, brown liquid. You skim off the clear stuff at the top that's the high-end stuff. The rest is richer, opaque, and cheaper, perfect for street food. Garum was the magic ingredient in Roman cooking. It added umami before anyone knew what umami was. Romans sprinkled it on everything: stews, vegetables, sausages, even fruit. It was ketchup, soy sauce, chili sauce, and more. Historians still debate whether garum was actually delicious or just a necessary salty condiment. Some ancient texts hailed it as liquid gold. Other texts describe it in language usually reserved for swamp monsters. Seneca, the philosopher, called it a luxury for fools. But perhaps his chefs still used it. It wasn't just a flavor. Garum was a food. Whole towns along the Mediterranean coast existed to make it. Huge vats lined the coasts of Hispania and North Africa, pouring out barrels of fish. It was traded across the empire, labeled, priced, and sometimes counterfeited. A good bottle of garum could cost more than wine. A bad one could clear a room. And the smell wasn't faint. You could smell a garum shop half a mile away. The scent wafted through the markets, permeated the taverns, and lingered on your tunic after dinner. If you lived in a Roman city, you knew about garum. You tasted it. You inhaled it. And sometimes, if the vat of garum was bubbling enough, you tried not to think about it. Vendors had their own recipes for garum. Some added herbs, others used different types of fish. A few included ingredients so secret that modern food safety committees would faint just from hearing the list. One recipe reportedly mixed garum with fermented barley and crushed dates. Another used sea urchin and wine vinegar. No two stalls made the product exactly the same, but all agreed the spicier, the better. There was even garum for drinking. That's right, drinking. A diluted version was sold as a hangover cure or digestive aid. Imagine waking up with a pounding head and someone handing you a glass of salted fish water. The Romans did that, willingly. Yet garum was beloved. It was the flavor of home, of empire, of everyday life. It made beans more palatable. It made cabbage a little less tragic. And it helped street vendors disguise, say, creative ingredients. If your stew smelled fishy, you added garum, problem solved. Garum also left its mark, literally. Archaeologists have discovered entire amphorae labeled with the type of garum and its source. Some jars still bear the mark made in Pompeii. Premium blend, with mackerel, like old-fashioned wine, but for fish sauce. It even had celebrity endorsements. Pliny the Elder wrote about it. Apicius, Rome's most famous gourmand, included it in almost every recipe. And when Mount Vesuvius erupted, burying Pompeii in ash, it preserved not only the people and the architecture, but also the jars of garum that remained intact, waiting to be poured out. Strangely, very little garum remains today. The actual recipe has been lost to time, and modern recipes are mostly guesswork. But the legacy of garum has not disappeared. It persists, changes, evolves. You find it in Southeast Asian fish sauces, in Worcestershire, in soy blends. The idea of breaking down proteins into a salty, rich liquid spread. The Romans didn't invent fermentation, but they made it famous, and very, very smelly. So the next time you dip your spring rolls in fish sauce or drizzle some Worcestershire sauce on your burger, remember you're tasting something ancient, something Roman, something fishy. And as the steam rises from your thermopolium, you can almost hear a vendor mumble, "Need more garum." There was even garum for drinking. That's right, drinking. A diluted version was sold as a hangover cure or digestive aid. Imagine waking up with a pounding head and someone handing you a glass of salted fish water. The Romans did that, willingly. Yet garum was beloved. It was the flavor of home, of empire, of everyday life. It made beans more palatable. It made cabbage a little less tragic. And it helped street vendors disguise, say, creative ingredients. If your stew smelled fishy, you added garum. Problem solved. Garum also left its mark, literally. Archaeologists have discovered entire amphora labeled with the type of garum and its source. Some jars still bear the mark made in Pompeii, premium blend, with mackerel, like old-fashioned wine, but for fish sauce. It even had celebrity endorsements. Pliny the Elder wrote about it. Apicius, Rome's most famous gourmand, included it in almost every recipe. And when Mount Vesuvius erupted, burying Pompeii in ash, it preserved not only the people and the architecture, but also the jars of garum that remained intact, waiting to be poured out. Strangely, very little garum remains today. The actual recipe has been lost to time, and modern recipes are mostly guesswork. But the legacy of garum has not disappeared. It persists, changes, evolves. You find it in Southeast Asian fish sauces, in Worcestershire, in soy blends. The idea of breaking down proteins into a salty, rich liquid spread. The Romans didn't invent fermentation, but they made it famous and very, very smelly. So the next time you dip your spring rolls in fish sauce or drizzle some Worcestershire sauce on your burger, remember you're tasting something ancient, something Roman, something fishy. And as the steam rises from your thermopolium, you can almost hear a vendor mumble, "Need more garum, plus." Flat, charred bread, often sold by the slice, was the backbone of Roman meals. You ate it plain, you dipped it. You used it as a spoon for your stew. Sometimes it was smeared with honey. Other times it was just warm enough to hide its staleness, but it filled the gap between beans and disappointment. And sometimes, just sometimes, you would have cheese. It wasn't the soft-eat, creamy delight you'd imagine. This was aged sheep's cheese, hard as marble and doubly salty. You bit into it with your teeth, chewed slowly, and told yourself it would hold up in the heat, which is more than you can say about your tunic. For dessert, don't make the mistake of expecting cakes and custards. If you're lucky, you might find a date roll or a donut. Something fried, crunchy, and sweet enough to replace the cabbage you made earlier. A street vendor sprinkles sesame seeds on his honey cakes. He says it's a family secret. Maybe it just keeps the flies away. So what do you drink with all this? Not water, if you're smart. Roman water, unless piped through a good aqueduct, was more of a gamble than a refreshment. Most people drank pasca, a sour mixture of vinegar and water, sometimes with herbs. It was cheap, sour, and supposed to be refreshing. Soldiers loved it. Workers tolerated it. Children grimaced but drank it anyway. If you have more money, try Mulsima wine mixed with honey. It's sweet, slightly intoxicating, and helps wash down that sausage. Some vendors served it warm on cold mornings. Others kept it cool in jars buried in the ground. It's not fancy, but it's better than pasca and significantly better than boiled cabbage water. So here you are in the middle of the day, full of porridge, beans, and bread. You've been eating standing up, your bowl perched on a bucket, and your fingers are covered in sauce. Your breath smells of garlic. Your shirt smells of smoke. And surprisingly, you're in a good mood. Because this is Rome, and for all its marble and mythology, this is a city built on beans and patience. You glance down at the bowl. There are still a few chickpeas left. You tilt the bowl, scrape up the last of them, and savor the warm, salty end of your frugal feast. You may not have dined like a senator, but you ate like a survivor. And in Rome, that's what really counts. You return to the thermopolium, as usual. But this time, it's not just for food. It's for company. It's for noise. It's for the familiar chaos of Rome's most democratic institution, the street vendors. Here, class lines blur more than stew left in the sun for too long. The man sitting next to you wears a frayed tunic that smells like he's been unloading pots for 5 hours. The woman behind him is dressed in silk, obviously poor, obviously enjoying herself. At this vendor, hunger is the great equalizer. No matter who you are, you have to point to a bubbling dolium and hope it's not fish guts today. This is Rome's social network before the internet, before the paper, before the privacy. You lean your elbows on the counter, warm, lubricated. You don't ask why. The vendor's son is shouting about fresh bread, though no one believes him. Someone is laughing. Someone is arguing about the results of a chariot race. Someone is definitely trying to flirt with the woman serving flatbread and wine. You glance around and realize this isn't just lunch. It's a live show about Rome itself. Here, a freed slave is arguing politics with a street performer. Over there, a soldier brags about having survived 3 campaigns in Dacia, while a boy sneakily adds garum to his father's stew. No one cares what you're wearing, or how many goats you own. What matters is what's in your bowl and whether you have the courage to eat and talk. Historians still wonder how central these stalls were to Roman life. Were they just for the poor, or did everyone, from merchants to judges, stop by for a quick bite and a gossip? The truth was probably somewhere in between. After all, even senators had to eat, and sometimes they'd rather eat anonymously, hands full with lentils like everyone else. You heard the gossip before you tasted your food. Did you know that Gaius of the Fourth Ward was caught diluting his wine, and Marcia, the washerwoman? Apparently it wasn't just laundry. Even the latest scandal from the Senate had come here first filtered through 10 mouths and seasoned with enough spice to ruin a reputation. The vendor shook his head. "That's not what I heard," he said, and so on. A new version was born. There was gambling, too. Dice games on overturned crates, bets on who could eat the most sausages without breaking a sweat. The gladiators argue, who is faster, who is stronger, who is dead. One man insists that the retiarius is superior. Another scoffs, "Nets and tridents, please." He waves his spear like a sword. The argument dies down. You recognize a familiar face, an old man who always eats alone, always carries his own spoon. He sits in the corner, mumbling to himself between bites. Some say he was once rich, others say he never was. No one knows. Everyone nods to him, out of respect perhaps, but into superstition. A stray dog enters, not a stray, well-fed, probably someone's nearby. It sniffs under the counter and is given a bite by the cook. It is trained by hunger, like everyone here. You sit down. Well, squat. The steps are warm. The wall behind you is crumbling. You set the bowl on your knee and scoop out a spoonful of beans and barley. Across the street, someone is playing a flute. Too bad. A child claps anyway. A few men groan. The vendor rolls his eyes. You smile. Because this time, you are not alone. This is your community, your daily ritual, your lunchtime movie theater. There is a comfort in the noise, the chaos, the burnt edges of flatbread. This is where you overhear business deals and wedding plans, where people joke about taxes and funerals at the same time. Rome is a city of marble. Yes, but it is also a city of shared bowls and overlapping stories. Thermopolium is not polite, it is not quiet, it is not clean. But it is real. And that makes it more Roman than the steps of the Senate. You glance down at your stew. It's thicker than yesterday. You pretend not to notice. The man next to you hands you his crust of bread half chewed, but the gesture is sincere. You nod, take it, and dip it into the mess. Rome may not always be kind, but it's always alive. And here, in the middle of the street, with the smell of garlic on your breath and the dust on your sandals, you're part of something bigger than yourself. By now you know when your food has a warning label instead of a label. Something is wrong. Roman taverns aren't just places to eat, they're places to gamble. Not with dice this time, but with your digestive system. The stew is warm, delicious. The bread is hard. That's to be expected. But the fish smells hopeful, like it really wants to be food. You eat it anyway. Because it's cheap, because it's fast, because the chef winks at you like you're sharing a secret, and because, honestly, garum covers most sins. Still, you remember last week's story, little Marcus lying on his back after eating a bad sausage? Maybe it was the vendor, maybe it was fate. Either way, he can't talk or walk. Food fraud in Rome wasn't a scandal, it was a tradition. Vendors watered down their wine. They cut flour with chalk. They sold yesterday's beans as today's delicacy. It was all part of the show, a meal and a mystery in every bowl. And if it tasted a little off, that was just the spice of life. Historians still debate the extent of deception in Roman cuisine. Some believe it was rampant, unchecked, an empire sustained by lies and lentils. Others argue that the pride most vendors took in their food was exaggerated. But when your customers included desperate laborers, drunken soldiers, and people who would eat anything with garum in it, standards were shaky. Have you learned to recognize the warning signs? Is the vendor talking too much about the freshness of the meat run? Dolium bubbling too hard? Stay away. Bread squeaking when you bite into it. Pray. But fraud isn't the only danger. There's competition, and where there's competition, there's bribery, fighting, even riots. Yes, real riots. There was a notorious brawl in Sabura, a crowded slum. Two vendors fought over a corner stall. One accused the other of stealing their lentil recipe. A pot was thrown. A jar of mulsum shattered. In the end, 6 men were bleeding, and a goat mysteriously disappeared. No one talked about the goat. Food is political. Status matters. Near a bathhouse, prime location. Near a brothel. Surprisingly, a good place to sell breakfast. Some vendors bribed officials to secure their spots. Others threatened rival stalls with rotten fish and slander. It was brutal, and a plate of chickpeas. And then there were the more deliberate dangers. Poison. Not often, not overtly, but enough to make people nervous. A rival senator was found dead after a meal. A wealthy widow suddenly stopped attending parties. Sometimes garum was more than just fermented fish. Sometimes it was laced with glass powder or strange herbs that no one could pronounce. If you were rich, you had someone taste your food. If you were poor, you were lucky. Or not. You thought about that as you sipped your pasca. It was sour, and it had to be sour. At least today, no one was going to kill you. And what about hygiene? That was just a rumor. Most stalls were located next to open sewers. Leftovers fell to the ground and stayed there. Dogs, cats, and worse, rummaged through the garbage. The stench is constant. Rotting smoke of vinegar, and is that a rat, maybe? But it's just passing through. You need to build up your immunity. If your stomach survived the first 10 years, congratulations, you're now invincible. Or at least stubborn. But danger is part of the allure. Eating in Rome is an act of faith. Faith in the vendor, faith in your gut, faith in the idea that hot means safe and bubbling means edible. You take another bite. The stew smells garlicky, thick and suspicious. You chew slowly. You ignore the crunching. Maybe it's a seed. Maybe it's not a seed. Either way, you're not the only one taking a risk. The man next to you just ordered oysters from a street stall in the summer. He's braver than a legionnaire. You smile, you nod, you dip your bread, you survive. Because in this city, eating is more than a necessity, it's a challenge. And every day you get through, you get to do it all again tomorrow. Evening falls over Rome. The cries of the hawkers fade to echoes. The clang of metal against stone fades under the weight of dusk. And the city breathes a sigh of relief. The day is over. But Rome, never really sleeps. You walk slowly, your feet sliding over the cobblestones worn smooth by centuries of footfall. The smell of roasted onions and burnt bread still lingers on your tunic. Your hands are greasy from the last of the fried chickpea patties, crispy on the outside, soft and warm on the inside, eaten too quickly while leaning against the wall near the piazza. Your stomach is full. In typical Roman fashion, both satisfied and a little suspicious. Around you, hawkers load their wares onto carts. Wooden lids slam shut on clay dolias. The last drops of garum are poured into earthen pots. A stray dog licks the dirt under a bench. Chasing after memories of meat, an old woman is sweeping lentil pods into a pile with a broom made of dried reeds. She hums a tune older than the aqueducts. You turn a corner and find yourself on a quieter street, the kind that only locals venture out to after dark. The flickering light of an oil lamp casts long shadows across the crumbling walls. Somewhere, a child laughs. Somewhere else, a man plays a flute not very well, but with feeling. You stop near a street vendor roasting small fish over an open fire. The flames crackle. The smoke carries salt, smoke, and a faint scent of citrus. You don't buy, you don't need to, just smell it. You inhale and close your eyes for a moment. This is what Rome tastes like when no one is looking. Not the rich people's feasts, with pine nut stuffed dormice and wine-soaked liver. Not elaborate plates of food carved from marble and served by slaves in gilded dining rooms. No, this is another Rome. The real Rome, a crust of bread, a bowl of barley, a ladle of stew passed around, a chef's wink when the garum is particularly generous, a fig stolen from a neighbor's tree, a sip of sour wine from a clay cup that leaks slightly at the top. It's not flashy, it's not always safe, but it's familiar. You continue walking, passing a group of workers still arguing about the price of grain. One man insists that the latest shipment from Alexandria is late. Another blames the baker. A third blames Jupiter. No one agrees, but everyone laughs. You pass a woman sitting on the doorstep, shelling peas into a wide, shallow bowl. She doesn't look up, but she offers you a bowl anyway. You take it, nod, and put it in your mouth. It's sweet, rough, and earthy. Moments like these don't make it into history books, but they stay with you. Some historians still debate the role of food in keeping the Roman Empire together. Was it the roads, the army, the laws, maybe? But maybe, just maybe, it was food that truly united Rome, from Hispanic olives to African fish sauce, from Egyptian wheat to Gallic honey. It wasn't just what they ate, it was how they shared it, how it filled their mouths and their silences. You think about that as you sit on a low ledge near the island. The wall behind them is warm. Your hands rest on your thighs, one still clutching the edge of the now empty bread bag. The sky is turning a deep purple, and a star, maybe Venus, maybe Mars, is beginning to twinkle above the rooftops. You exhale, long or too slow, satisfied. It's a good day. You're not sick. You haven't lost any money. The vendor hasn't diluted the wine much. The beans are plump. The customers are noisy. The city, as always, is itself. And now, time to rest. Relax your shoulders. Slow your breathing. Let the sounds of Rome at night settle into a background lullaby. Soft voices, the creak of shutters, the soft cooing of pigeons perched on the rafters. Let your thoughts drift like steam rising from a bowl of hot soup. Let the flickering oil lamps become stars. Let the memories of garlic and barley, of figs and pasca, of warm bread and cool shade, gently guide you away from the noise. You have walked all day. You have eaten well. You have survived the mysterious meat and avoided the vendor with his twitching eyes. You deserve this quiet. Now, close your eyes. Let the city hum. Let your belly rest. And sleep, my friend, like a Roman who has survived another day. Now that the streets are quiet and the fires have dimmed, your body begins to settle. You've tasted the city, walked its alleys, and sat beside its boiling pots. You've felt the rough bread in your hand and the warmth of stone beneath your legs. You've shared a bowl, shared a rumor, and watched the sky turn from gold to ash. Let that memory linger now. Let it soften behind your eyes like steam rising from a worn clay cup. In this moment, nothing presses, nothing calls. Your stomach is full, your feet are still, and the only thing left to do is rest. So breathe a little deeper. Let the noise fade. Let the garlic and laughter drift away like fog. Let the oil lamps flicker out behind your eyelids. You are safe. You are home. And though you live far from Rome, in time and place, the warmth of a simple meal, the hush of twilight, and the comfort of stillness, these are things all humans know. So as your breath evens, let your limbs grow heavier. Let the thoughts of dolia and garum, of barley and beans, to slip into the background. Let it all go. There is no stew to finish, no bread to break, no coin to count. Just this quiet, just this weightlessness, and just the rhythm of your own slow breath. Sleep well, friend, and dream of lentils. Hello, everyone. Tonight we are lost in a world of silk and spices, where the air smells of boiling brine and cinnamon, and the maps still have monsters printed on the edges. You are in Venice, mid-3rd century, a city that looks like it is floating and acts like it owns the world. And in a way, it does. You were born here, a place that lives and breathes commerce. The canals carry more secrets than water, and people here don't walk so much as they glide, through deals and debts and double meanings. It is noisy and chaotic and beautiful in the way only a wealthy, slightly arrogant port city can be. And you are Marco Polo. Well, not Marco Polo yet. You are just a curious boy with a keen nose and sharper questions. You were born in 1254 into a merchant family, not dukes, not churchmen, not warriors, merchants, which in Venice was no different from nobility. But there was one small problem. Your father, Niccolo Polo, had left before you were old enough to form memories of him. He and Uncle Maffo had set sail into the unknown on a business trip that turned into a years-long adventure. Crossing half the known world, they didn't send postcards. They didn't even send rumors. For most of your childhood, They were just names, legends at worst. So you grew up without them, raised by your extended family, learning to haggle for pepper instead of fishing or fencing. You were book smart, yes, but you were also city smart. You knew when someone was lying. You knew when a gondolier was charging too much. And more importantly, you know you don't want to stay in Venice forever. Nisaye. When your father and uncle finally return in 1269, they don't come empty-handed. They come back with stories of the East, with gifts, exotic clothes, and most importantly, a mission. From Kublai Khan himself, the great Khan has asked them to bring back holy oil from Jerusalem and some Western scholars. And so, of course, they agree. And of course, they take you with them. You're 17, just 17. You've probably made it as far as the outskirts of town, and suddenly your father looks at you as if you're a companion, not a son. "Marco," he says, perhaps stuffing the scrolls into his saddlebags, "we're leaving in the spring." You blink. "Where?" "To China," he says, as if that's the next island. You don't speak Mongolian. You don't even speak perfect Arabic. What you do have is a quick mind and a tendency to stare too long at things most people miss. You have no diplomatic training, but you are observant, intensely observant, almost annoyingly so. You notice the way someone folds a letter. You remember the smell of a merchant's beard oil. You absorb the world as if it were a puzzle you were determined to solve. Historians still debate why Niccolo took his teenage son on what seemed like a fateful journey. Some say he wanted to preserve his legacy. Others say he just needed someone to carry his luggage, maybe both. But none of that matters now. Because you agree. Of course you do. It's the call of the unknown. It's the whisper of the East. It's realizing that while other kids are fighting over the gondola paddles, you can actually see the end of the world. You leave Venice in 1271 with your father. There's no grand parade, no dramatic goodbye. Just you, your father, and your uncle, heading east with a letter from the Pope and too few socks. You go to Acre in the Holy Land to get the promised holy oil and the Pope's blessing. The Pope, by the way, has just died, so you wait for a new one. That takes months, because apparently the church bureaucracy moves slower than a camel caravan. Finally, with the holy oil secured and the letter in hand, you set off for lands where Latin means nothing and your surname is just another sound. Through Armenia, through Persia, across the hot, deadly fangs of the desert. You think it will be exotic and poetic. Instead, it's mostly thirst and sunburn. The camel growls at you. Your cloak smells of horse. Bandits stalk the hills, dust billows. Every time you close your eyes, you dream of fountains. But at the same time, you learn something. You meet Zoroastrians who worship fire. You taste fermented mare's milk, which sounds romantic until it hits your tongue. You watch people pray to different gods with the same desperate hope. You realize that people, wherever they are mostly just trying to survive, to trade, to laugh, and not die on the way to market. You realize something else, too. You're changing, too. Venice has taught you how to bargain. The road has taught you how to endure. You no longer complain when you get blisters. You no longer flinch when people shout in a language you don't understand. You begin to memorize everything, not just the sights, but the smells, the sounds, the colors of the sky when you're in a place no one in Venice has ever heard of. You are not just following a path. You are absorbing a world. And deep down, though you do not say it, you know that you will not be the boy who left if you come back. Your feet ache. It's the first thing you notice every morning. Not the cold, not the unfamiliar stars, just your feet, aching as if they've been crushed under a church, because they almost are, at least figuratively. You're somewhere between Armenia and Persia now. That means long, flat, empty stretches of land. Sand creeps in places you didn't know existed. The wind whispers in languages even your father can't translate. You squint at the horizon and realize you've been squinting for days. Your face feels like sandpaper. The road, if you can call it that, is just a suggestion. It winds through valleys and up bare cliffs, over cracked earth that sags beneath your boots. There are occasional rest stops, places where other travelers trade silk for safety. But usually there are only ghosts crumbling ruins, forgotten temples, broken pots buried in the dunes like skeletons. And then there are the camels. Let's talk about camels. You think they're majestic? Try riding one. Try riding a camel for 9 hours in the salty wind while it coughs and farts and glares at you like you've insulted its mother. You begin to suspect that camels weren't made for transportation, but for humiliation. They chew like philosophers and spit like drunks, but still you come to respect them. After all, they're the only ones around here who know what they're doing. Your father and uncle seem fine. They talk about markets and measurements as if it's just a regular Thursday. You try to keep up with them, but it's like chasing moving shadows. They've done this before. You don't, but something strange is happening. You're adapting. You're learning the art of keeping quiet until the guards stop watching. You're learning to feign confidence when talking to a stranger with a curved knife. You're learning to sleep with one eye open. You're also learning that dates those soft brown ones go well with dried lamb. Every day brings something new, and not always pleasant. There's a man who tells fortunes with a goat's liver, a woman who weaves scarves with her feet, a boy who claims to have seen dragons in the mountains, and always, the silence between towns, broken only by the creaking of wagons and the whispered prayers of travelers who have seen too much. Historians still argue about the exact route you took. Did you go through Yazd through Hormuz? Did you follow the main caravan paths or sneak onto the back roads? No one can agree, because while your journey is one of the most famous in history, it is also one of the darkest. But the landmarks are undeniable. You pass through Balkh, a city of ruined temples and wind-blown towers, where you watch Zoroastrians bow before fires. You see markets overflowing with saffron and sadness. You see people who have never even heard of Venice, yet somehow understand the art of negotiation better than half your countrymen. You cross deserts that sparkle like boiling glass. At night, you bury your feet in the sand to keep warm. During the day, the sun turns your cloak into an oven. You lose weight. Your skin becomes firmer. You stop reacting when the sky changes color or the mountains glow at dusk. It's just the world being dramatic again. And then there are robbers. Always robbers. They don't wear masks. They don't whisper threats. They just appear out of nowhere, like vultures circling. One moment you're admiring a rare blue flower. The next, someone's holding a knife to your chest and asking how much your shoes cost. Sometimes you bribe them. Sometimes you run away. Once, you witness a companion with whom you shared figs being dragged behind a sand dune. You never see him again. No one speaks of it. Yet you keep moving forward. Through the heat, through the hunger, through the doubt. Because somewhere far ahead, beyond these mountains and memories, there is a palace where the great Khan awaits. And although no one else says it, you sense it. You will not meet just an emperor. You will meet your future. You haven't written anything down. No ink, no parchment, just the notebook in your mind, scribbled with scents and faces and obscure dialects. Your memories are vague. They're messy, but they're vivid. You remember a temple that smelled of cinnamon, a gate shaped like a horse's mouth, a caravan leader who snored louder than thunder. These things don't belong on a map, but they're real, sometimes more real than the places themselves. And as the miles roll by, you begin to understand the strange secret of travel. It doesn't just change where you are. It changes who you are. When you catch your first glimpse of the Eastern Highlands, you're no longer the boy who left Venice. He had soft hands and sweet dreams. And you have calluses on your feet and stars in your eyes. You've seen the sunrise from 5 different horizons. You've learned to say hello in 6 languages, badly, but still. You've eaten things you can't name, slept in places without walls, and learned that people, regardless of their gods, clothes, or cuisine, all want the same thing: to feel safe for one more night. You haven't even been to China yet, but the world has opened up before you like a scroll unrolled at your feet, and you haven't finished reading it. Your feet finally stop hurting, not because the journey is over, oh no, but because they're numb. Somewhere along the trail into northern China, through rolling hills and quiet valleys, you lose track of time. The cold is sharper now. The air is thinner. You begin to understand why poets write about mountains, not just for their beauty, but the slow, quiet realization that the sky doesn't care if you succeed or not. But somehow, you do. The road slopes downward, the ground softens, and suddenly there it is. Chengdu, Xanadu, if you're feeling poetic. A city of silk and snow, of smoke rising from golden roofs, of tents larger than chapels, and streets wide enough to swallow Venice. Your mouth goes dry, partly from the altitude, mostly because this is it, the end of the road, the destination that has haunted your father's eyes for years. You are 17. You smell like horse. Your boots are falling apart, but you straighten your shoulders, adjust your belt, and step into the lion's den. Kublai Khan's court is not what you expected. Forget the skull-topped thrones and the screaming chambers. This is an empire of control, not chaos. The palace is a strange mix of brutality and elegance. Marble courtyards, jeweled fabrics, flags that sparkle like fish scales. Guards in light armor stand at every corner, but they don't growl. They don't need to. Power here rumbles like low thunder, steady, invisible, everywhere. And Khan, he is nothing like the monsters you've heard of back home. He doesn't breathe fire. He doesn't eat children. He didn't even raise his voice. Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan, ruler of the largest continuous empire in human history, sat silently, his eyes sharper than any blade. And as you entered, he looked at you not as a king would look at a subject, but as a scholar would look at a riddle. You froze. You forgot your rehearsed greeting. You probably looked as if you'd swallowed your tongue. But then, for reasons you'll probably never fully understand, he smiled. Not a smile, just a twitch, but it was enough. Historians still debate why Kublai Khan took such an immediate liking to you. Some say it was your youth, your eyes fresh in a world that had faded. Others say it was your memory, your ability to recall every detail, every scent, every curve of a carved pillar from a place you had passed 6 months earlier. Or maybe it was just that you were unfazed. In a court full of flatterers and assassins, that meant something. You didn't speak Mongolian, not yet, but you bowed, you watched, you listened, and the Khan, he listened. He asked questions. You answered carefully. He tested you. You passed. And soon, without even realizing how it happened, you become useful. No power, no nobility, just useful. Which, in this empire, is better than both. You are given robes, not silk, not yet able to speak, but clean. You are allowed to eat at tables near the courtyard. You are not noble, but you are no longer a foreigner either. You begin to learn a little of the language. You learn the names of eunuchs, guards, scholars, dancers. You observe how people behave when they think no one is looking. You are very, very good at it. You see astronomers drawing maps of the stars with instruments you have never seen. You see paper money changing hands in markets so organized that they make the piazzas of Venice look like open-air sales. You see messengers hurrying on horseback with color-coded messages strapped to their backs. Every 25 miles, there was a new supply station, with food, fresh horses, and men trained to run the empire properly. You were no longer in Europe. Europe still emptied its balconies. Here, there were tax inspectors with abacuses. You spent your nights scribbling notes on rags, in the margins of old notebooks, or just whispering to yourself in the dark so you wouldn't forget. You weren't writing a book, not yet. You were just trying to keep up. The empire was a living thing, and you were inside it. One day, Kublai Khan called you closer. He had been watching you. He wanted you to travel to inspect, to report, to learn. You nodded before he finished. And just like that, the boy from Venice became an official of the Mongol Empire. Something like that. No title, no office, just a horse, a few guards, and an order: go see what you need to see. Your father looks proud. Your uncle pats you on the shoulder. You wonder if they knew this would happen all along. And then you're out riding again. But this time, you're not a stalker. You're Khan's eyes. The first time you are assigned to an official mission, you almost forget which side to sit on. You are nervous, not because you doubt your abilities, but because this time, there is no one to turn to, no father to speak for you, no uncle to whisper warnings. You are the delegation. You are the inspector. You are the voice of the Khan, riding into the provinces like a letter sealed with the coat of arms. These distant lands are chaotic, barbaric, and untamed. They are like blotches on the edge of the empire where the Khan's authority is but a whisper. You thought the journey to Chengdu taught you about diversity. It was only the beginning. Now you are galloping through forests where the trees hum with insects the size of coins, through cities that smell of lotus and wet stone, through rice paddies so meticulously sculpted they look like green mosaics. And all the while, lots of people speak dialects you've never heard of, eat things you didn't know were edible, build gravity-defying temples. In Yunnan, you meet officials with tiny ivory seals that can command entire armies. In Sichuan, you visit salt mines that run like veins through the earth. You ride horses through Tibet, where monks walk barefoot on ice and chant in bone-chilling tones. You observe, you ask questions, you taste the local tea, even if it smells like boiled leather. Your report unwritten, but you remember it all. What the official was wearing, the smell of the market, whether the crops were good, whether the soldiers seemed bored, whether the local chieftain bowed too low or not at all. Historians still argue about how many places you visited. Some say dozens, some say hundreds. Some even suspect you're exaggerating, or perhaps retelling someone else's story as your own. But the Mongol archives mention a foreigner who traveled extensively on behalf of the court. They describe someone who combined observation with taste, someone who could ride into a town and write out with a mental map a list of names, and just enough scandal to keep the great Khan amused. Because that's part of the job, too. You're not just collecting data, you're also collecting stories. You sit in taverns alongside butchers and priests, you chat with soldiers and shepherds, you watch puppet shows, you sneak into temples, you drink with smugglers, sometimes on purpose. You learn how to ask the right questions and when not to. And when you return to the court, days, weeks, or months later, you stand before the Khan and speak. You don't preach. You describe. You paint with your voice. The market in Tabriz has changed its trade routes. The mountain city hides a new temple. The water priest speaks of rebellion. Even in his dreams, the governor has a new lover, and everyone pretends not to notice. You speak, and Kublek listens. Not because he believes every word, but because you see what others miss, and he believes your eyes. Your role is more than just an inspector, more than just a spy. You are becoming something else. A storyteller who tells the truth but skillfully conceals it. A merchant of the moment. A diplomat of details. Sometimes you're asked to negotiate. You sit across from the tribal chieftains with bushy eyebrows. You speak through interpreters, through symbols, through hand gestures. You smile, you bow, you lie, you win. Other times, you are asked simply to observe, to disappear into a city and observe, to stand in the middle of a market until its rhythms become familiar, to recognize who greets a royal messenger sincerely and who does so only when being watched. You are free. You are adventurous. You were sent to India once, where you almost die of fever. Your lips are chapped, your thoughts are clouded, and for a week you forget your own name. When you recover, you immediately ask where the nearest port is, not to escape, but to explore. You cannot stop. You are addicted to another place. You chase the unknown like men chase gold, and you don't care if your boots are torn, or if your horse hates you, or if your back aches from too many nights on the wooden floor. You've learned how to sleep anywhere, how to eat anything, how to stay alert without appearing alert. You've also learned that the empire, though vast and powerful, is fragile. The farther you travel, the more cracks you see. Greedy governors, strained supply chains, whispers of rebellion. You don't panic, you record. Because that's your job. Not to fix, not to rule, just to observe. And in doing so, you begin to understand a deeper truth about the role you were never trained for. You're not here to wield power. You're here to witness it. And one day, you will bring it back not shaped into policy or currency, but into stories that can outlast the empire itself. Today, you ride into Yunnan in the middle of the rainy season. The road is no longer a road. It is a muddy river pretending to be a trail. Your horse hates it. You hate it even more. Every few miles, someone's cart flips over and gets swallowed up in the mud. At one point, a wheel falls off your cart, and you spend half a day knee-deep in something that smells like mushrooms and despair. The forest here is not silent. It is noisy. Birds chirp, frogs bark, insects buzz in your ears like tiny philosophers shouting riddles. The air is thick and humid, like soup someone forgot to season. You can't sleep well because everything drips. The tent drips, the leaves drip, even your thoughts are wet. But you didn't come here just to suffer. You came here to observe. In the cities of Yunnan, you notice the roofs curving like smiles and the people wearing long robes dyed in deep indigo and bright ochre. The market is small but orderly. You are offered an exotic herbal tea, and as you sip it politely, your tongue goes numb. You are not sure if that is what is supposed to happen. You ask questions. Some people answer, others just stare at your clothes as if you were a chicken standing upright. But you learn that the roads here disappear every rainy season. Taxes are collected in rice, not coins. An official has built his own small fortress with guards who pretend not to recognize the Great Khan's seal. You report everything. Then you continue on to Sichuan. And suddenly, there are mountains. Mountains that pierce the sky and dare you to climb them. The passes are narrow and treacherous, paved with frost and surrounded by silence. Bandits lurk behind the rocks, but they don't usually attack. Why bother when the cliffs do the work for them? Here, you encounter landslides. Not metaphorical ones, but real ones. You see entire wagons swept downhill in seconds. You help dig survivors out of the snow, which stinks of crushed spice crates and lost letters. In the valleys, the work is no easier. The cities here are bustling, but strict. You visit a place called Chengdu, where the walls are high and the bureaucracy is even more massive. Local officials count everything: grain, fish, even steps taken across bridges. You meet a scholar who explains the bamboo card population registration system. You nod and pretend to obey. You are shown paper money, thin sheets of paper stamped with black ink and red seals. It looks like the stuff you use to pack your lunch. But it works. People use it, trust it, defend it with their lives. You tell Khan the system is fine. You try the local food. It's spicy. Not Venetian chile spicy, not even Persian pickle spicy. It's twice burnt spicy. Your tongue regrets everything. But you keep eating, mostly because the locals seem to enjoy your tears. Then you're on the road again, south this time, towards Myanmar. Do you think you've seen the heat? No. The pagan forests feel like a wet fever. You pass through green tunnels where vines stretch out like lazy ghosts. The sun is low. Everything smells of bark and fruit and whatever is dead nearby. Mosquitoes are everywhere. You swat one and it bleeds. You swear it winks before it flies away. Your guide here is a barefoot monk who talks about karma as if it were a business transaction. You sleep in wooden temples where bats roost on the ceilings. You try meditation once and almost fall asleep while sitting. In the city, you see golden stupas glowing like lanterns in the jungle mist. You see elephant processions, dancers with fingers as graceful as water. You are offered a dish made from fermented fish sauce. You eat it, you regret it. Then the fever sets in. First chills, then sweat, then shivering. You lie on a straw mat in a stilt hut near the Irrawaddy River, watching shadows move on the walls. Someone sings outside. Someone else grinds herbs. You think of Venice. You think of home. You are not dead, but you are close. As you recover, you head north this time toward what will one day be Vietnam. Here, everything feels different. People grow rice on neat terraces that rise up into the hills like stairways to the sky. The cities are smaller, more hidden. Officials are polite, but wary. They bow, but not too low. They smile, but only with certain jokes. You notice that French has never touched this place, but Chinese has. The Chinese influence hangs here like a shadow. Even the architecture bears its mark: the curved roofs, the painted gates, the canals lined with red lanterns. You try local drinks that taste like smoke and sugar. You see fishing boats shaped like dragonflies. You talk to a woman who reads fortunes from snail shells. You ask how taxes are collected. She laughed and said, "Depends on who's looking." You included that in your report, too. Historians still argue about whether you actually visited these places. Some say you were never in Pagan, never in Champa. They say your descriptions are too vague, too poetic, too patchy. But others point to names, trade routes, temple layouts, details you couldn't have guessed without being there yourself. Either way, you return to court as thin as old silk. You rode through the mud of the rainy season, almost fell off cliffs, burned your tongue, nearly drowned in sweat, and survived a fever that made you forget your name. But you brought it all back. And when Khan asked about your impressions, you didn't just tell the truth. You told stories of floating bridges, of coins with square holes, of temples where people whisper secrets to trees. You do not lie, but you have the power to enchant, because truth, carefully shaped, is stronger than myth. And you, Marco Polo, have become master of both. The sky over the port city of Quanzhou is heavy with sea mist and the distant cry of seagulls. You stand there, 20 years older than the boy who left Venice, staring at the masts of 14 ships swaying gently with the tide. You have seen singing deserts, glittering cities, and cold, fiery mountains, but nothing can prepare you for this. You are going home. Well, sort of. The Khan does not want you to leave. He is older now, more suspicious. But politics, as usual, finds a loophole. A Persian prince has requested an escort for his Mongol bride, Princess Kokachin, by sea, not by land. Too dangerous, too far. It requires someone trustworthy, someone experienced, someone who speaks enough languages to negotiate, enough culture to avoid war, and enough sense not to die in the process. You meet all the conditions. So Kublai Khan reluctantly lets you go. Not as a deserter, as a final funeral. And so begins the most disastrous part of your entire journey. You board a fleet of ships with more than 600 souls diplomats, guards, monks, cooks, servants, porters, and a teenage princess silently carrying the weight of an empire. At first, the sea feels soothing. No plunder, no mountains, no dust, just water and wind. But it turns out the ocean doesn't care about your background. The first storm hits after 3 weeks. You're thrown across the deck like a sack of rice. Half the crew retches. One ship disappears completely. You never find it. The second storm comes with a lightning bolt that cracks the mast and rips the sails like paper. Your maps dissolve in the salt water. Your food supplies rot. The cook dies of dysentery. The kitchen cook disappears, probably not in a good way. Pirates swarm like flies. You bribe one crew with a barrel of spices and 3 barrels of pickled garlic. Another crew tries to board at night. You fight back with broken oars and boiling tea. It sounds heroic, but it's not. You lose 2 soldiers and the princess nearly drowns trying to hide in a barrel of wine. Sickness follows. Many cough up blood. Limbs swell. The monks run out of prayers. The ocean becomes calmer not because it's quieter, but because there are fewer people to shout about. Weeks turn into months. You reach ports you barely recognize. Sri Lanka, Sumatra. Somewhere hot and humid, mangoes are sold on shore while your crew buries the dead. You survived. Just enough. As you stumble into the Persian port of Hormuz, you are no longer a traveler. You are a shadow, stitched together by sun, salt, and sheer stubbornness. Only a few dozen of you survive. The rest are but whispers. But the princess survives. You hand her over to the prince, who bows and weeps not just because his bride has arrived, but because she has arrived alive. You have fulfilled your final task. You think you will be honored, but you are not. Hormuz is in chaos. The caravan routes are winding with new conflicts. Cities you once passed with quiet confidence are now unfamiliar. Frayed at the edges, the Mongol Empire is crumbling. The Great Khan is fading. The news finally reaches you in Tabriz. Kublai Khan is dead. Did you hear about his death while you were still on the road? Or later, when you had crossed the Caucasus? You are not sure. Time no longer flows in a straight line for you. But with his death, the world you lived in, served, is gone. The Mongol court becomes a memory. The tokens of power you carry lose their meaning. And so, after 20 years of exile, you return to Venice. Home. But it is not home. You walk down the street and no one knows you. Your clothes are wrong. Your accent has changed. The coins in your pockets are different. You wear strange fabrics and have strange scars. Venice squints at you, then shrugs. You try to explain where you have been. No one believes you. They whisper that you are a fraud. Or worse, crazy. You talk about cities with millions of people, about dragons made of metal, about burning stones that cook rice, about people bathing every day. Every day. Europe can't stand it. You think maybe you can just quietly blend in with the crowd, buy a shop, sell silk. But Venice goes to war with Genoa. And somehow, like a bad joke, you get dragged into the war. You fight a naval battle, you lose, and you go to jail. Again. Because of course you would lose. And that's where it happens. That's where history unfolds. You meet another prisoner, a writer named Rustichello de Pisa. He spent his career writing romances about knights and dragons. He's bored. You're bored. You start talking. And suddenly, he's writing. You talk. He writes. You describe golden roofs, and he turns them into poetry. You mention tigers, and he gives them wings. You talk about money, and he makes it sound like magic. You don't correct him much. Why should you? He's helping you do what you've been doing all your life, turning the truth into something unforgettable. Historians still argue about what's true in the book you two wrote. Some say you made it all up. Others say it's mostly true, just seen through the eyes of a man who watches too much and sleeps too little. All you know is this. You told your story the only way you could. And when they let you out of prison, the world outside has changed. Because now they know your name. The walls of the Genoese prison are damp and cramped. You can hear the sailors coughing through the stone. Someone is singing off-key 2 cells away. Your back aches, your beard itches, and for the first time in your life, you are quiet. Not traveling. Not inspecting neighboring provinces. Not watching the sky change color over a new city. Just quiet. You are Marco Polo, and you have seen more of the world than anyone in this building could ever imagine. The Venice-Genoa War doesn't care about that. It doesn't ask if you're tired, or if you've just come back from the dead. No, it asks if you can hold a sword, and Venice says yes. And so here you are, locked in a stone box because your city can't make peace with itself. A soldier again, though no one here cares what title you have. No Khan, no silk, no elephants, just iron bars and stale bread. And him? Rustichello of Pisa, your cellmate. A romantic writer, a weaver of legends, the kind of man who dreams of knights with magic swords and ladies in high towers. He squints at you from across the cell and asks, "Have you ever seen a dragon?" You're silent. Then you say, "No, but I've seen fire eaters in Indian bazaars. I've seen mountains that glow red at night. I've seen a city of millions of people burning black stone to cook their food." He blinks, his mouth opens. "Go on," he says. "And so do you?" Night after night. You speak softly, in a low voice, letting the rhythm of your words drift through the room like smoke. You tell him about Chengdu, where the Khan's pavilions glitter like gold under the steppe sky, about the paper money that mobilized armies, about the courier stations that allowed news to travel across the continent faster than any European king could have dreamed of. You describe the heat of Yunnan, the icy passes of the Pamirs, the salt deserts of Persia. You talk about raiders and astrologers, horse milk and elephant armor, about officials who could calculate harvests based on the shape of the clouds. Rustichello listens. Then he writes. He writes as fast as he can, page after page, turning your memories into stories part travelogue, part myth, part miracle. You don't stop him when he makes the silk shine a little brighter, or when he gives the tiger teeth. Why not? After all, the truth is always elusive. And sometimes the best way to get people to listen is to let the magic speak first. Historians still argue about how much of it is true. Have you ever seen giant birds that can carry elephants? Was the unicorn you mentioned just a ferocious rhinoceros? Why not mention the Great Wall, tea, or chopsticks? No one agrees. But the book, they'll call it Il Milione, spreads like wildfire. Before you're released, your name is whispered from abbey to market. Kings read your story. Merchants copy routes, sailors dream of Cathay. You've become famous, and also a little ridiculous. Because no one knows what to believe. You're released from prison in 1299, your sentence is served, your book has been shipped. You return to Venice, but it's not the same. The city has grown, or maybe it has shrunk. You walk through the canals that once carried images of your childhood, now filled with faces that don't know you. You're a local ghost with an unfamiliar name. Some call you the man of a million lies. Others ask for your autograph. Most just stare. You return to business, get married, raise a daughter, buy a house. Outwardly, you become an ordinary Venetian citizen again. But beneath the silk and silver, the stories still burn. No one believes them all, but no one forgets them either. And as you grow older, you stop defending yourself. Let the rumors spread. Let them argue over the details. You give them your best map, the kind drawn not with lines, but with words. In 1324, you fall ill. Age catches up with the man who has crossed kingdoms. Your bed is soft, the room is quiet, the priests gather. So do your family, your friends, even a few skeptics. They gently ask you if there is anything you want to confess. Any lie you want to clear up? Any story to retract? You smile, not smugly, just enough. And you say, I haven't told the half of what I saw. Those are your last recorded words. And they are true. Because how could you tell everything? How could you explain to someone who had never left Europe what it was like to stand in the great Khan's court? Hearing 1,000 bells ring in a Buddhist temple, riding for weeks without seeing a soul, then stumbling upon a city more brilliant than anything your childhood church could have dreamed of. You can't. You try. But even with all the pages, all the ink, all the memories, you only gave them half, maybe less. But it was enough. Because what you give is more than geography, more than customs or money or walls. It is possibility. You have ripped open the shell of the known world and shown people the light beyond. And centuries from now, a sailor named Columbus will sleep with your book next to his bed. He will dream of the places you describe. He will try to get there. And it won't matter if he lands somewhere else, because the world he imagined is the world you gave him. So close your eyes now. Let the maps roll into parchment. Let the roads disappear beneath the soft clouds. Let the deserts cool, the camels rest, the seas calm. The stories are now quiet. You have been a boy through mountains and markets, through palaces and prisons, through time. And now you are home. Feel your breath slow. Feel the weight of the world become light. Tonight, you do not have to cross jungles. You do not have to face pirates, blizzards, or ancient scrolls. You are just here, in this quiet moment, wrapped in the echoes of a story that has traveled farther than any caravan. Let the light fade from your memories. Let the great Khan's court dissolve into mist. Let Venice sleep under the silver moon. The journey is over. But the magic, it will stay with you. So rest assured now. The world is still waiting when you wake up.